Well, it's up to 39 trillion now. It's going up by something like 2 trillion a year. And the short answer is there's really no way out other than default. But a country doesn't default in its local currency almost ever, and so default happens through purchasing power. It basically is a debasement that happens, and I would say it's already been happening. I mean, really ever since COVID, currency and bonds have underperformed virtually everything.
$39 trillion, that is a number so large it's almost impossible to visualize. But macroeconomist Lyn Alden isn't just looking at the size of the debt, she's looking at the velocity. It's growing by $2 trillion every single year. Most people hear the word default, and they think of a sudden overnight collapse, a 1929-style crash where the banks close and the world ends. But what Alden is warning us about is much more dangerous because it's invisible. It's a default through purchasing power. It's the silent theft of your savings through the debasement of the currency you work for. In this deep dive, we're breaking down why the US has officially entered a fiscal spiral, why the comparison to Japan, which many used to say everything will be fine, is actually a massive warning sign, and how this $39 trillion time bomb fundamentally changes the case for Bitcoin.
We're more likely in a long, kind of slow spiral, which is that it just kind of keeps debasing. It's never as bad as like the sensationalists will say, or like rarely that bad. They always think it's kind of, 2 years away from blowing up entirely. And it just keeps not doing that. But then it also never really corrects itself. And it takes years and potentially even decades. Like I think the current kind of fiscal spiral that the US is in is at least going to go into the 2030s. And from there, I mean, after about a decade, there's not much further you can see out because all sorts of crazy stuff can happen in the course of a decade, geopolitically, militarily, nonlinear breakdowns and legal structures. But at least from a kind of an economic or macroeconomic standpoint, over the next 5-10 years, I think it's only going to keep spiraling. And ironically, I don't think it'll be much higher public debt to GDP in the US. It'll be much higher nominal debt, much higher nominal GDP, and kind of a flat to mildly up debt to GDP. And so that kind of those fiscal deficits don't just mount into more and more debt to GDP. They instead mount in terms of increasing costs, kind of inflation that stays above the baseline. And you kind of get this K-shaped economy that we're in, where if you own assets and or if you're on the receiving side of deficits, you're generally doing pretty well. Whereas if you're on the tight side of monetary policy and or you don't own a lot of assets, you're generally struggling. And I think that's unfortunately probably going to keep widening for years to come.
This is the new normal that nobody wants to admit. The debt isn't going to explode. It's going to melt. By inflating the nominal GDP, the government makes the debt look manageable on paper while the actual cost of living stays permanently above the baseline. This creates the K-shaped reality Alden mentioned. If you own the hard assets, the Bitcoin, the real estate, the equities, you are on the upper arm of the K. You're being lifted by the very inflation that is destroying the lower arm. If you are a saver, or if you rely purely on a wage that doesn't outpace debasement, you are being structurally left behind. The spiral Alden sees lasting into the 2030s isn't a theory, it's a mathematical necessity. There is no political will to cut the $2 trillion deficit, and there isn't enough tax revenue in existence to pay it down. The only way out is through.
Japan went into their situation with a structural current account surplus. The United States goes into the situation with a structural current account deficit. And it's only offset by the fact that we have the global reserve currency. But that's kind of like a balanced economy. It's kind of like a person standing upright, whereas like the U.S. is like a really strong person like pushing against the wall. So we're really imbalanced, and we're held up by the fact that we're up against the wall. But if that wall collapses, then we just fall right over.
For years, economists have pointed to Japan as the blueprint. Japan has a massive debt-to-GDP ratio, yet their society is stable, clean, and functional. But Alden exposes the fatal flaw in that comparison. Japan is a wealthy retiree. They have a massive current account surplus, meaning they own trillions in global assets that send them a steady stream of income. They are standing upright. The United States, however, is running a structural deficit. We are leaning against the wall of dollar dominance. As long as the world requires dollars to trade, the wall holds. But as we see the multipolar shift Alden discussed, where countries begin diversifying payment channels and reserves, that wall starts to crack. If the wall moves, the US doesn't just stumble, it falls over because it has no balance. We consume more than we produce, and we owe more than we own.
I think kind of the appreciation of one portable capital, just portable, liquid, potentially self-custodial capital is really attractive. It gives the holders optionality to make permissionless payments. And then when they look around and say, okay, equities are kind of expensive, bonds and currencies are gradually melting down everywhere. Gold and silver just ran up a ton. The other really big option is Bitcoin.
When the melting down of currencies becomes the baseline reality, the investment thesis shifts from how do I get rich to how do I not get poor? As Alden points out, once you realize that bonds and cash are guaranteed to lose purchasing power, your list of exits gets very short. Equities are already priced for perfection. Gold is making all-time highs. That leaves Bitcoin the only asset that is portable, self-custodial, and mathematically immune to the $39 trillion spiral. We aren't waiting for a collapse. We are living through a restructuring of what money is. And in a world of $2 trillion annual deficits, permissionless payments, and portable capital aren't luxuries, they are survival tools. Lyn Alden's base case is clear. The spiral continues through the 2030s. The question is, which side of the K-shaped economy will you be on? If this breakdown helped you see the big picture, hit the like button and subscribe for more macro deep dives. Let me know in the comments, do you think the reserve currency wall holds for another decade, or are we closer to the fall than people think? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.